Sir, I told you. This seat situation is already settled.
I'm exactly where my ticket says I should be. Mr. Cole? Darius Cole?
Sir, I didn't know you were on my flight.
Sir, I need you to gather your things and move to 31E. Darius Cole looked from the flight attendant to the boarding pass resting on his knee. Seat 18A, window, exactly where he had booked himself 3 weeks earlier, across the aisle from his 11-year-old daughter, Nia, in 18C. Feature. He was a 41-year-old black man in a faded navy quarter zip, his close-cropped hair threaded with a little gray at the temples, and nothing about him suggested he had wandered onto the plane by mistake. Still, the attendant had checked his pass twice and had not asked the white woman beside him to prove anything at all. "I'm assigned here," Darius said. He kept his voice low because Nia was watching over the top of her paperback. Flying did not scare her anymore, but adults arguing near her father still did. The attendant, whose name tag read Kelsey, gave him the patient smile people used when they had already decided what kind of conversation they were having. "There's been a seating adjustment. We need this row available." "For what?" Kelsey glanced at the woman in 18B before answering. She was in her 50s, silver blonde hair tucked behind one ear, dressed in jeans and a charcoal sweater instead of the sort of suit Darius associated with executives. She had boarded alone and spent the last 5 minutes answering messages on a phone with a cracked leather case. "It's an operational accommodation," Kelsey said. Darius looked toward 18C. "Daughter is there. We can have someone keep an eye on her." Nia lowered the book. "That did it." "No," Darius said. "You can tell me what changed, or you can leave the seats the way they were ticketed." Kelsey's smile disappeared at the edges. "I'm trying to resolve this without making it difficult." The woman beside him stopped typing. Darius felt the old pressure behind his ribs, the one that always arrived before he had to decide whether being precise would be called argumentative. He had spent most of his career around people who treated exact language as a safety tool on an aircraft. Vague words caused expensive mistakes. In other places, he had learned vague words could be used to hide them. He held up the boarding pass. "Was my seat reassigned in the system?" Kelsey paused. It was half a second, maybe less, but Darius caught it. "I'm asking you to cooperate with a crew request. That isn't what I ask." Across the aisle, Nia whispered, "Dad?" "Bug." The nickname softened something in his face. He wished it had softened the situation too. The woman in 18B finally spoke. "Is he being moved because of me?" Kelsey turned toward her immediately, and her posture changed. "Mrs. Vale, we're just trying to provide a little additional space for you." Darius looked at the woman again. Vale. He knew the name, though he could not place it fast enough. The woman's mouth tightened. "I didn't request additional space." Kelsey blinked. "Your office contacted our station team." "My office requests flexibility. They don't get to displace passengers." That was when Darius remembered. Evelyn Vale, chief executive of North Star Grid Systems, the infrastructure company whose name appeared on half the airport charging stations along the concourse. He had seen her photograph in an industry journal, though the polished headshot had looked nothing like the tired woman sitting beside him with reading glasses hanging from her collar. Kelsey lowered her voice. "Mrs. Vale, I can handle this." Darius almost laughed, but Nia was still watching. A chime sounded from the front galley. The cockpit door opened, and the captain stepped out carrying a paper dispatch sheet folded lengthwise. He was broad-shouldered, late 50s, with the red imprint of a headset still visible near one ear. His eyes moved down the aisle, past Kelsey, and stopped on Darius. For the first time since boarding, Darius saw recognition arrive before suspicion. The captain smiled. "Darius Cole?" Kelsey turned. Darius stood halfway, surprised enough to forget the argument for a moment. "Captain Reeves?" Reeves came down the aisle with his hand already extended. "I heard you might be on this flight. After what you put us through in Denver last spring, I figured you'd never trust one of my landings again." Nia grinned. Kelsey did not, and Evelyn Vale, still seated beside Darius, looked from the pilot to the boarding pass in his hand, as if the seat assignment had just become the least interesting question in row 18. Captain Reeves shook Darius's hand once, firm and brief, then glanced toward Nia. "And this must be the famous Quality Control Department." Nia closed her book around one finger. "I told him the Denver landing was bumpy." "You told everybody," Darius said. Reeves laughed. She wasn't wrong. Then his attention shifted to Kelsey, whose expression had settled into professional stillness. "Everything all right back here?" Kelsey answered before Darius could. You're resolving a seating accommodation. Reeves looked at the boarding pass in Darius's hand, then at the seat numbers above the row. What accommodation? For Ms. Vale, Kelsey said. Yet, her profile was flagged for adjacent seat preference when possible. Evelyn Vale leaned forward. Preference, not displacement. Kelsey's eyes flicked toward her. The station agent understood the note differently. Darius heard the wording change. 5 minutes earlier, the request had belonged to the crew. Now it belonged to a station agent who was no longer on the aircraft. He did not need to call that dishonest yet. He only needed to remember it. Reeves held out his hand. May I see your pass, Darius? Darius gave it to him. The captain checked the printed seat, then the small boarding timestamp. 18A boarded normally. He returned it. Unless the cabin system shows something different, that's his seat. Kelsey shifted her weight. The handheld was showing an adjustment, then checked the handheld. There was no sharpness in Reeves's voice. That made the instruction harder to evade. Kelsey took the device clipped beside her service apron and woke the screen. Darius watched her thumb move through the passenger list. Years of reviewing cockpit interface failures had taught him to watch hands when explanations became complicated. People often said one thing while their fingers searched desperately for another. She stopped. What does it show? Evelyn asked. Kelsey hesitated. It shows Mr. Cole in 18A and my daughter in 18C, Darius said. Yes. No one spoke for a moment. The cabin around them remained busy with ordinary departure sounds. Overhead bins thudding shut, seat belts sliding through buckles, a child 2 rows back asking for pretzels before the aircraft had moved an inch. Reeves nodded once. Then there's nothing to resolve. Kelsey looked toward Evelyn. I was trying to honor a premium service notation. Evelyn's expression hardened, though her voice did not. By choosing him, the question sat differently from an accusation. It left Kelsey room to answer. I was told to create space around you. There are 3 passengers in this row, Evelyn said. You asked only one to move. Kelsey's face colored. Seat 18A was the easiest operational option. Darius looked past her toward the aisle. Why? She turned to him. Excuse me. Why was my seat easier than hers? He nodded toward Nia, then toward Evelyn, or the passenger in 19B, or anyone else with an assigned seat. Kelsey opened her mouth and stopped. Darius felt Nia watching him again. He wanted to keep pushing until the answer was undeniable, but he also knew she had been counting down to this trip for 2 months. Her mother had died 4 years earlier. Since then, every vacation had become something Darius planned too carefully, as if enough preparation could guarantee a child would never lose anything else. He sat back down. I'm staying in my assigned seat, he said. That's enough for now. Reeves gave him a small look that said he understood the choice. Good. We need the cabin secured. Kelsey stepped away, but not before tapping something into the handheld. Darius noticed. So did Evelyn. When Reeves returned toward the cockpit, Evelyn leaned closer, keeping her voice below the noise of the ventilation system. She added a note. Probably. You're not going to ask what it says, Darius buckled his seatbelt. Not while we're holding up a departure. Evelyn studied him for a second. You do this for a living? He smiled without much humor. I spend a lot of time asking systems what they recorded after people tell me what happened. Across the aisle, Nia groaned. That means yes. Evelyn laughed, but Darius's attention stayed on Kelsey as she moved toward the forward galley. The handheld was still in her palm. For the first time, the seat was no longer the part that worried him. By the time the aircraft pushed back, Darius had decided he would not ask about the note until they landed. That decision lasted 11 minutes. Kelsey came through the cabin for the final compliance check, pausing at row 18 long enough to look at Darius's seatbelt, tray table, window shade, and backpack under the seat. She checked Evelyn's belt with a glance and moved on. Darius noticed the difference because noticing differences was part of his work, and because once a pattern announced itself, pretending not to see it required effort. The engines climbed through their familiar low vibration as the aircraft turned toward the runway. Nia pressed her forehead lightly to the window across the aisle. Cloud layers high, she said, repeating something Darius had taught her years ago. Good eye. She smiled, pleased with herself, and for a few seconds the argument receded. Darius watched the airport lights slide past and thought about how easily a small trip could become a test of discipline. He had promised Naya a weekend in Seattle before school started again. Aquarium, Fairy, hot chocolate if the weather behaved. He did not want the memory attached to another room where adults debated whether her father belonged where he was sitting. After takeoff, the seatbelt sign stayed on through a patch of chop. Evelyn opened her laptop but did not type. "You said you asked systems what they recorded," she said. "What kind of systems?" Darius looked at her, then at Nia, who had put on headphones and returned to her book. "Aviation safety systems, mostly. Flight deck interfaces, alert logic, crew workflow. I consult on human factors failures when an incident report doesn't match what the equipment actually did." Evelyn's eyebrows rose. "That explains Reeves. Denver was a simulator review. Their crews were getting conflicting altitude cues after a software update. Reeves was part of the test group. So you fixed it? We found the failure path. Somebody else fixed it." Darius preferred the distinction. People who took credit too broadly usually missed the part where systems were built by teams. A service cart appeared at the front of the cabin. Kelsey worked one side while another attendant handled the other. When she reached row 18, she set a bottle of water on Evelyn's tray without being asked, then looked at Darius. "Would you like something?" "Coffee, please." She entered it into the handheld. "Anything else?" Her thumb moved again before she stepped away. Darius watched the device disappear toward row 19. Evelyn closed her laptop. "You saw that too?" "I did. You think she's documenting you?" "I think she's documenting something." A few minutes later, the other attendant returned with Darius's coffee. Kelsey did not. The cup was warm, bitter, and barely half full. Darius drank it anyway. When the seatbelt sign went off, Nia came across the aisle to whisper that she needed the restroom. Darius stood and let her pass. Kelsey, returning from the rear galley, stopped beside them. "Sir, passengers need to remain clear of the aisle during service." "He's letting me out," Nia said. Kelsey looked at her, then at Darius. "I understand I'm speaking to your father." Nia's face changed. Darius felt heat rise along his neck. This was the moment he could hear himself becoming less patient, and the awareness did not make patience easier. "She asked to use the restroom," he said. "The cart is behind us. The aisle is clear." Kelsey's mouth tightened. "I'm asking you to follow crew instructions." Darius stared at her for a second longer than he should have. "Then give me an instruction that matches what's happening." Evelyn looked up sharply. Kelsey tapped the handheld. That small motion mattered more than the words. Darius understood immediately that he had given her something usable. Not misconduct, not refusal, but a sentence that could be rewritten as confrontational if somebody wanted it to be. He stepped aside and let Nia pass. "I shouldn't have said it that way," he admitted when she was gone. Evelyn leaned back. "You were frustrated. That doesn't make every choice useful." When Nia returned, Darius sat down and opened the airline app. The seat assignment was still 18A. No rebooking, no service change, nothing visible to him. He took a screenshot anyway. Then, using the in-flight messaging portal, he submitted a short request to customer care. Preserve all seat change entries, passenger service notes, and cabin incident records associated with his reservation. He did not accuse Kelsey of anything. He did not mention Evelyn. He simply asked that the data not be overwritten. A confirmation number appeared on the screen. Darius saved it. 2 rows ahead, Kelsey's handheld chimed. She looked down at the display, then back toward row 18. This time she knew he had created a record she could not control alone. The confirmation number should have made Darius feel better. Instead, it sat in his phone like a small metal object he had swallowed. Nia noticed before he said anything. She was coloring a map of Puget Sound on the activity sheet the airline had handed out at boarding, pressing too hard with a blue pencil. "Are we still doing the ferry tomorrow?" "Absolutely." Said that too fast. Darius looked at her and almost smiled. Her mother had used the same accusation whenever he tried to make certainty sound casual. "Yes, we're still doing the ferry." Nia went back to the map, but not before giving him the look that meant she had accepted the answer without believing it. The preservation request changed the cabin in a way most passengers would never have noticed. Kelsey stopped using the handheld near row 18. Another attendant handled the next service pass, and when Kelsey came through collecting cups, she did not address Darius at all. That was not necessarily suspicious. People avoided uncomfortable conversations. Darius knew better than to make motive out of silence. Then Evelyn's phone lit up. She read the message, closed it, then opened it again. "My chief of staff says your airline contacted our travel desk." Darius turned toward her. "About what?" The seating note. She lowered her voice. Apparently, someone asked whether my office had requested an empty adjacent seat as a security measure. Did you? No. Has your office ever? Not for a domestic commercial flight. Darius sat back. Engine noise softened as they reached cruise altitude, a steady mechanical wash under the cabin voices. Then somebody is trying to establish that the request came from you. Evelyn nodded. That's what it looks like. He did not like how quickly his mind assembled the next steps. Ethan. If Kelsey had written that he resisted a security-related accommodation, the original seat request could be recast as routine risk management. His refusal would become the event worth documenting, while the reason he had been singled out disappeared into language no passenger could see. We should ask for a copy now, Evelyn said. No. She frowned. Not. Because we don't know what exists yet, and if we start arguing about wording in the cabin, we become the story. He looked toward Nia. I already pushed once when I shouldn't have. You told a flight attendant her instruction didn't match the situation. Eden. And she was holding the device that records the situation. Evelyn studied him. You think being right and being useful are different things. Most days. She gave a short laugh. Your board would hate you. Your board has probably paid someone like me. That earned a genuine smile, and for half a minute they talked about nothing important. Nia leaned across the aisle to ask Evelyn whether CEOs got free snacks everywhere. Evelyn told her CEOs mostly got meetings they had not requested and almonds they did not want. He decided that sounded like a bad job. The ordinary moment helped more than Darius expected. It also made the next interruption worse. Kelsey appeared beside his seat with a folded form. Mr. Cole, I need to clarify something for the cabin report. Darius did not touch the paper. What are you clarifying? Whether you refused a crew-directed seating change before departure. Evelyn turned in her seat. Darius felt the pressure return, sharper now because he understood the shape of it. Was there a valid seat reassignment in the passenger system? I'm asking about your response to an instruction. And I'm asking what authority the instruction was based on. Kelsey exhaled through her nose. This doesn't need to become adversarial. There it was, not loud, not openly hostile. A surface-reasonable phrase that turned disagreement about the record into a problem of temperament. Darius nearly answered too quickly. He caught himself. Right that I asked whether my assigned seat had been changed in the system, he said. Right that the system still showed 18A. Right that. Bill said she had not requested my removal. Kelsey's eyes moved toward Evelyn. Ms. Vale isn't part of your reservation? No, Evelyn said. I'm a witness. Kelsey folded the form once more. We can address this after landing. That's fine, Darius said. For the first time, she seemed surprised by his agreement. He looked across at Nia, who had stopped coloring again. That was the cost he had been trying not to count. When Kelsey walked away, Darius opened his phone to message his sister, who was picking them up in Seattle. He typed that they might be delayed after landing, then deleted the explanation twice before sending only, might need 10 extra minutes. Don't worry. Nia watched him. You always say don't worry when there's something to worry about. He put the phone away. I know. She slid the blue pencil across the aisle to him. Then color something. Darius looked at the unfinished water around Bainbridge Island and took the pencil. 10 minutes later, Captain Reeves emerged from the cockpit again, this time without a smile. He stopped beside row 18 and spoke low enough that only Darius, Evelyn, and Nia could hear. Darius, when we land, don't leave the gate area right away. Darius, set the pencil down. Reeves glanced toward the forward galley. Operations received your preservation request. There's a problem with the timestamp on the seat change entry. That was not proof of what happened. It was the first sign that the record itself might have been altered. Darius did not ask Reeves to explain in the aisle. After landing, he said. The captain nodded. That's better. He returned to the cockpit before Kelsey could come forward. Darius picked up the blue pencil again, but the outline of Bainbridge Island had become impossible to focus on. A timestamp problem could mean almost anything. A delayed sync, a station correction, a device that had cached an entry before uploading it. He had spent too many years investigating software behavior to mistake an anomaly for intent. Evelyn seemed to read the restraint on his face. You're not convinced. I'm convinced something needs checking. That sounds annoyingly responsible. It's ruined several good arguments. Na smiled despite herself. She took the pencil back and colored the ferry route in purple because, she informed them, Blue water on blue water was lazy design. Darius let the conversation stay there until descent began. He needed the ordinary rhythm more than he wanted to admit. When the cabin tilted towards Seattle and the landing gear produced its deep mechanical thump beneath their feet, Nia pressed both palms to the window and announced that she could see water everywhere. The aircraft reached the gate 14 minutes later. East passengers stood as soon as the seatbelt sign went dark, filling the aisle with backpacks and rolling cases. Darius remained seated. Evelyn did too. Kelsey made one announcement requesting that passengers continue into the terminal without blocking the jet bridge. She did not look toward row 18. When the cabin finally cleared, a station operations supervisor boarded wearing a reflective vest over a white shirt. She introduced herself as Marisol Grant and asked Darius, Evelyn, and Kelsey to remain near the forward galley while Nia waited beside her father. Captain Reeves stayed just outside the cockpit door. Marisol held a tablet against her forearm. I'm not making a misconduct finding here. I'm trying to establish what the systems show before anything gets overwritten or interpreted. Darius appreciated the sentence because it separated preservation from judgment. She turned the screen toward them. Mr. Cole's reservation shows 18A from ticketing through boarding. There is no completed reassignment. Kelsey folded her arms. I said the handheld showed an adjustment. It shows an attempted service entry, Marisol replied. That's different. She enlarged a timeline. At 6:41 p.m., 19 minutes before boarding, someone at the gate had opened Evelyn Vale's passenger profile and added a notation requesting space around a high-value traveler where practical. At 6:58, Darius's seat had been selected as the proposed move. At 7:06, the entry was canceled before the cabin door closed. Darius pointed to another line. What's 7:18? Marisol's expression changed. That is the problem, Captain Reeves mentioned. The line showed a second edit to the same service note. It had been entered after pushback, using Kelsey's cabin credentials. Kelsey stepped closer. I documented what happened. Marisol tapped the screen. You changed the reason code from passenger preference to crew compliance concern. Evelyn stopped leaning against the bulkhead. Darius felt no satisfaction. The difference between those two labels was too important. One described an optional service request. The other suggested that he had failed to follow a legitimate safety or operational instruction. Kelsey looked at him. He challenged a crew instruction in front of other passengers. Marisol did not argue. Did he refuse a safety instruction? No. Did he remain in a seat that the passenger system showed assigned to him? Kelsey's silence lasted several seconds. Marisol entered something on her tablet. Then the compliance code is unsupported by what I can verify right now. Kelsey's face tightened. I was trying to manage the cabin and protect a priority customer experience. The gate team gave me the impression Ms. Vale's office expected the space. Evelyn answered before Darius could. My office did not ask you to move him. I understand that now. Darius looked at Kelsey. You understood that before takeoff. She met his eyes. For a moment he thought she might apologize. Instead, she said, I still had a cabin to manage. The sentence was reasonable enough to almost work. Marisol locked the tablet. I'm placing the incident note under review and restricting further edits. Kelsey, you'll submit a fresh statement after you're off duty. Mr. Cole, customer relations will receive the preserved audit trail. No disciplinary conclusion is being made tonight. That was not victory. It was something more useful. The record could no longer quietly become a different story. Then Marisol looked at Darius again. There's one more issue. She turned the tablet back toward him and opened the original gate entry. The employee who had selected his seat for removal had not chosen 18A randomly. A filtered passenger list had been opened first, and the filter was labeled Solo Adult Non-Odious. Darius looked at Nia. He had not been traveling alone. The system had classified him that way anyway. Marisol looked at the classification twice before speaking. The reservation contains both passengers. Your daughter is linked correctly. The filter should not have returned you as a solo adult. Darius kept his eyes on the tablet. Was the filter built from loyalty status? In part. Age no fare class? Yes. Still, he nodded once. Economy fare, no elite tier, one adult name at the top of a reservation that also contained a child. A crude shortcut could explain the first two labels. It did not explain why that shortcut had been trusted more than the actual passenger record. Kelsey shifted beside the galley door. That filter is used all the time. It helps us identify seats that can be moved with less disruption. Darius looked at Nia, still holding the purple pencil. Is disruption to whom? Kelsey started to answer, but Marisol raised a hand. We're not resolving the filter design at the aircraft door. That's fair, Darius said. But I want the logic preserved too. Not just the edits to my reservation. Marisol frowned slightly. The filter configuration sits with customer operations, not station control. Then send a preservation request there. Evelyn glanced at him. You think this is bigger than one bad decision? I think we don't know yet. That distinction mattered to him. He had watched investigations collapse because people named the conclusion before they understood the mechanism. The wrong story could become just as dangerous when told by the person who had been harmed. Marisol opened a new incident field. I can request retention of the query history and filter definition. I can't promise access tonight. Retention is enough for tonight. Kelsey gave a small, exhausted laugh. You're treating a seat move like an engineering failure. Darius turned toward her. No, I'm treating a system decision like a system decision. The answer came out sharper than he intended. Nia looked down at the pencil again. Darius rubbed his thumb across the edge of his boarding pass. And I'm tired, so I'm going to stop talking before I make this harder than it needs to be. Evelyn looked at him, surprised. And Marisol was not. That's probably wise for all of us. 20 minutes later, Darius and Nia were sitting near a coffee kiosk while Marisol finished the initial paperwork. Evelyn had stayed too, despite 3 calls from someone named Martin flashing across her phone. Nia was hungry enough to become silent, which Darius considered more serious than most safety alerts. He bought her a turkey sandwich and a packet of apple slices, then discovered she had no intention of eating the crust. You are 11, he said. This is becoming a labor dispute. It's structural bread waste. Evelyn laughed into her coffee. Eat. Darius smiled despite himself. The normality lasted until Evelyn said, My company buys travel through this airline's corporate program. He looked at her. We move about 1,200 employees a month. I can have my travel director ask for the filter documentation. No, the answer came too quickly. Evelyn's expression cooled. Why not? Because then it becomes the CEO asking for special access after an incident involving the CEO. I'm not asking for special access. I'm asking a vendor how it classifies passengers, and they'll answer you because of the contract. Yes, that contaminates the question. She leaned back. You'd rather wait for customer relations to send you a polite summary. I'd rather know whether the ordinary complaint path works before someone with leverage clears the road for me. Evelyn considered that. And if it doesn't? Then we learn something useful. Nia looked between them. Are you two arguing? Yes, they said together. Nia bit into an apple slice. Good. You sounded too friendly. Marisol approached carrying a printed acknowledgement and Darius's original incident reference. Your preservation request has been expanded. Customer operations confirmed they'll retain the seat selection query and the rule set that produced the solo adult flag. Darius took the paper. Thank you. There's more. The filter wasn't created for VIP seating. Evelyn set down her cup. Marisol continued. It was originally built for irregular operations, when agents need to reseat passengers quickly after aircraft changes. Someone at this station has been using it for premium service requests. That changed the shape of the problem. A tool designed for disruption recovery had been repurposed to decide whose inconvenience counted least. Who authorized that? Darius asked. We don't know yet. Marisol handed him a second page, but tomorrow morning customer operations is running the same query against a test copy of tonight's passenger list. Darius scanned the page. The test would show whether the filter had wrongly categorized only him, or whether it systematically favored certain fare and status combinations while overlooking linked children and actual travel parties. Evelyn read over his shoulder. For the first time that night, neither of them argued about what should happen next. They needed to see what the filter did when nobody was standing beside it trying to explain the result. The test started at 8:15 the next morning in a small operations room behind the airline's Seattle Service Center, where the carpet smelled faintly of burnt coffee, and the wall monitor still carried yesterday's departure board ghosted into its pixels. Darius had not planned to be there. He had planned pancakes with Nia, then the ferry. Instead, his sister had taken Nia to breakfast while he agreed to 1 hour with customer operations. He had nearly declined. The complaint could proceed without him, and he had promised his daughter this trip would not become work. But Marisol had called at 7:32 and said the test team wanted someone present who understood why an incorrect output could still look reasonable. Darius had heard too many engineers use that sentence after the fact. Evelyn was already in the room when he arrived, sitting beside a window with a paper cup and no laptop. "Before you object," she said, "I'm here as a passenger witness. My company hasn't contacted anyone." "Good." That sounded almost disappointed. "You've underslept, so am I. CEOs suffer too. Careful. Nia might revoke your snack privileges." Across the table, Marisol introduced two people without ceremony. Priya Shah, a customer operations analyst, and Leonard Cross, the regional service director. Leonard had the polished stillness of someone accustomed to entering meetings after other people had prepared the difficult parts. He shook Darius's hand, acknowledged Evelyn with the same tone, and did not mention her company. Priya projected a copy of the previous night's passenger list. "We're using replicated data. Here can modify a live reservation." She opened the reseating tool and selected the same filter. Solo adult, non-8s. 23 names appeared. Darius leaned forward. Priya changed one field. "Now I'll show linked travelers." 7 of the 23 disappeared immediately. Leonard frowned. "Why?" "Because the first query doesn't evaluate party linkage before returning candidates. So it can call someone solo who isn't traveling solo." "Yes." Priya selected Darius's replicated reservation. His name appeared at the top, Nia's beneath it, connected by the same booking reference. The relationship exists. The filter simply ignores it at the candidate stage. Evelyn looked at Leonard. "Then the label is wrong." Priya shook her head slightly. "Technically, the label describes the rule badly. The filter is finding individual seats occupied by non-status adults. It was built for irregular operations where agents may need to identify movable seat positions quickly." Darius appreciated the distinction even though it made the result worse in a different way. "So the system wasn't designed to decide who deserves inconvenience." "Correct. But that's how it was used." Priya opened the station activity log. There it was. 14 searches in 6 weeks using the same filter alongside premium service annotations. 11 resulted in attempted or completed seat moves. The room lost its morning casualness. Leonard asked, "Were any of those passengers traveling with minors?" Priya clicked through the records. 3. Darius felt something settle heavily behind his ribs. One mistake could be impatience. 14 searches were a practice. Leonard looked at Marisol. "Who trained the gate team to use this?" "We're still establishing that." "Kelsey?" "No evidence of that," Marisol said. Her cabin account edited Mr. Cole's incident note. She did not create the original candidate search. It mattered. Darius had spent the night angry at Kelsey. The test was now separating her decision from a larger one. Leonard turned toward him. "Mr. Eagle, I want to apologize for what happened." Darius shook his head. "Don't make this the apology meeting." Leonard stopped. "I want 3 things," Darius continued. Freeze use of this filter for discretionary premium seating. Preserve the prior searches and associated seat change records. And review the 11 cases where someone was actually moved, especially the ones involving children. Evelyn added, "And protect the employees who explain how this became normal." Leonard looked from one to the other. "Reasonable." "Reasonable isn't the same as authorized," Darius said. "Can you do it?" Leonard nodded. "I can suspend regional use of the workflow today. Corporate operations has to disable the tool nationally. I can also order preservation and case review within this region." "Do that first." Leonard picked up his phone not to make a dramatic call, but to send a written directive Priya could attach to the audit file. Priya watched the screen until the restriction appeared in the workflow console. Then she opened one of the earlier seat change cases. A father had been moved 12 rows away from his 8-year-old son. The reason field read, "Operational convenience." Darius stared at the words. The filter had never contained race. It had contained a shortcut about whose disruption seemed cheapest, and somewhere between the software and the people using it, that shortcut had learned how to become policy. Leonard's directive stopped new use of the filter within the region before Darius finished reading the earlier case. That part happened quickly. The harder part began when corporate operations joined by video and asked whether the restriction was really necessary before the review was complete. Rotated her laptop so the remote team could see the replicated passenger list. "We are not disabling the irregular operations tool," she said. We are suspending its use for discretionary premium reseating. Those are different actions. A man identified as Marcus Bell, Director of Network Customer Systems, leaned closer to his camera. The field teams need flexibility. If we freeze every workaround the moment someone complains, we create operational paralysis. Darius heard the phrase and almost admired it. Paralysis sounded much larger than what anyone had requested. How many flights yesterday used this filter for actual aircraft disruptions? It checked. 46. And for premium service seat changes? 6. Darius nodded. Then nobody is asking you to remove the emergency tool. We're asking why an emergency tool became a convenience tool. Marcus looked at him through the screen. I understand your concern, Mr. Cole, but the system itself does not contain a protected class field. And no one said it did. That interrupted the defense more effectively than an argument would have. Darius stood and moved closer to the wall display. Run the 6-week sample again, but this time compare who was selected against who was available in the surrounding rows. Same cabin, same general seat type. I want to know whether the filter kept pointing agents toward the same kinds of passengers because it ranked loyalty status and fare before party disruption. Priya looked at Leonard. Leonard said, do it. The query took less than a minute. The interpretation took longer. Across the 14 previous service searches, there had been 39 possible passengers who could have been considered for movement without changing cabin class. The tool consistently surfaced non-status travelers first. In 9 cases, higher status passengers seated alone had never appeared in the candidate list at all. In 3 cases involving adults traveling with children, the party link had existed in the reservation but had not been considered until an agent manually opened the booking. Marcus exhaled. He still doesn't establish discrimination. Darius kept his voice even. It establishes unequal exposure to inconvenience, and motive matters. For employee discipline, maybe. For fixing a workflow, not first. Evelyn, sitting near the window, spoke for the first time in several minutes. If a purchasing system kept routing the cheapest vendors into the highest-risk jobs because nobody reviewed the ranking logic, I wouldn't wait for proof of personal animus before changing the process. Marcus's expression tightened slightly. With respect, Ms. Vale, this is an airline operations matter. She nodded. Then answer him as an airline operations matter. Leonard rubbed one hand across his chin. Exactly are you recommending, Darius? It was the first time he had used his first name. Darius pointed to the candidate screen. 3 changes. Rename the filter so agents understand what it actually returns. Force party linkage review before a passenger can be selected for a discretionary move, and require a reason field identifying who requested the accommodation before an assigned passenger is approached. Priya added, we can also separate a regular operations mode from service recovery mode. Right now, the same shortcut is available in both. Marcus shook his head. That is not a same-day change. No one asked for same-day deployment, Leonard said. Can we place a control on discretionary use while engineering scopes it? Marcus paused. Yes. A warning gate and supervisor override could be implemented regionally today. Nationally? Not without change approval. There it was. Not magic, not instant reform, but an authority boundary. Leonard approved the regional control and formally escalated the national change request. Then Marisol placed Kelsey's cabin report beside the audit summary. Separate issue. Her compliance notation is unsupported and was added after the original seat request had already been canceled. Leonard read it. She'll remain off customer-facing duty pending review. Gate employee who initiated the seat search will also be interviewed. No termination decisions until statements and prior cases are checked. Darius agreed. He wanted accuracy more than spectacle. His phone vibrated. A message from Nia. Ferry leaves in 42 minutes. Auntie says you owe me 2 pastries now. Darius looked at the time and felt the cost of the morning all at once. I have to go. Leonard seemed surprised. They're not finished. You have what you need from me. He gathered his boarding pass and the printed preservation acknowledgement. Before leaving, he turned back toward Priya's screen, where the new warning gate had appeared beneath the filter. Discretionary reseating repures party review, and supervisor approval was only a temporary control. But for the first time, the system required someone to stop before deciding whose inconvenience was easiest. Darius reached the ferry terminal with 6 minutes to spare and found Nia standing beside his sister with a paper bag folded against her chest. She did not run to him. That was how he knew she was still angry. Just pancakes, I know. And Auntie ate one of my potatoes. His sister raised both hands. That accusation is under review. Ella almost smiled. Darius bought 3 tickets, and they boarded as the deck crew pulled the last chain across the vehicle lane. Only when Seattle began sliding away behind them did Naya hand him the paper bag. Inside were 2 pastries. "I saved yours," she said. The kindness hurt more than the complaint. Darius spent the crossing away from his phone. They stood outside where the wind pushed hard enough to make Nia lean into his side, and she made him identify every vessel she could see. He got 2 wrong on purpose and 1 wrong by accident. When she caught the difference, she laughed for the first time since the flight. His phone held 9 messages when they returned to the terminal. The important one came from Marisol. Regional Operations had completed its preliminary review. Kelsey's compliance notation had been removed from Darius's passenger history and preserved separately in the investigation file. She would remain off customer-facing duty, while Employee Relations reviewed her statement, the timing of the edit, and whether she had received prior guidance about premium passengers. An employee who initiated the seat search had been reassigned from discretionary seating decisions pending interviews. No one had been fired. Darius preferred that. The second message came from Leonard. The 11 completed seat moves found in the 6-week sample were being reviewed individually. 3 families had already been contacted because their linked reservations had not been considered before separation. Fees connected to those moves would be refunded, and the airline had offered to correct the service records where passengers had been labeled uncooperative after objecting. Then came the part Darius read twice. Corporate Change Control had approved a 30-day national trial. During that period, a discretionary reseating would require party linkage review, a documented requester, and supervisor approval before an assigned passenger could be approached. The old filter would remain available only inside a regular operations mode while engineering tested a replacement candidate tool. It was not a permanent fix. It was measurable. Nia watched him reading. "Good news?" Hastily. "That's not a yes." Darius put the phone away. "They changed the rules for now. They're checking the other families, too." "Did the flight attendant get fired?" "No." Nia considered that. "Are you mad a little at them? Or because she didn't get fired?" He laughed under his breath. "Both, maybe." That answer surprised him as soon as he heard it. Part of him had wanted a clean punishment, something that would match the humiliation in a way his daughter could understand. Kelsey had changed a record. The gate team had normalized a bad shortcut. The software had made the shortcut easy. Those were connected failures, not interchangeable ones. Nia nudged his arm. "Mom would say you're making the complicated face." He looked toward the water. Her mother used to call it that when he tried to solve feelings like engineering problems. "Your mom said a lot of inconvenient things. She was usually right. Extremely inconvenient." That evening, Evelyn called. "I received the airline's corporate notice," she said. They disclosed the temporary control to major travel customers. Darius sat on the edge of the hotel bed while Naya arranged aquarium brochures on the desk. "So they're making it public. To their customers, yes. And my travel director asked whether we should threaten to move our account if the national change doesn't become permanent." Darius waited. "I told him no." That surprised him, Evelyn continued. "We'll request the review results like every other corporate customer. No special ultimatum. Your board really is going to hate me. They'll survive." Before hanging up, she told him something else. The airline had asked whether Darius would participate in the 30-day evaluation as an external human factors advisor. He looked at Nia, who was holding up 2 aquarium schedules and waiting for him to choose. For once, Darius did not answer immediately. He had spent a weekend proving that systems should stop before making assumptions about people. Now he had to decide whether he was willing to give another piece of his life to helping one learn how. The airline's review moved faster than Darius expected in some places and slower in the ones that mattered. By the 3rd week, Employee Relations had completed interviews with Kelsey, the gate agent who initiated the seat search, 2 station supervisors, and 6 other employees who had used the reseating shortcut. The findings did not produce the simple story Nia had once asked for. Kelsey had not created the practice. But she had changed Darius's cabin note after pushback and used a compliance code that made an optional service dispute look like a crew authority problem. She received a final written warning, mandatory retraining, assignment away from lead cabin duties for 6 months. The gate agent had followed an informal premium service practice passed down by supervisors who wanted fewer complaints from high-status travelers. Two supervisors lost scheduling authority while management reviewed their role in normalizing it. No one called the outcome dramatic. That made Darius trust it more. The national trial produced harder numbers. Once party linkage became mandatory, attempted family separations during discretionary reseating fell sharply. Supervisor overrides also dropped after the reason field forced agents to identify who had actually requested the accommodation. Priya's team found something else. Nearly half the premium service moves in the earlier sample had begun with assumptions about what important travelers wanted rather than requests those travelers had made. Evelyn called that finding customer service theater. Darius told her it was the first executive phrase he had heard from her that he actually liked. She threatened to put it in a shareholder letter. At home, the issue was smaller. Nia had stopped mentioning row 18, but Darius noticed she checked their seat assignments twice before their return flight. He noticed because she tried to hide it. At the kitchen table a week later, he was replacing the rubber foot on an old toaster while she worked through math homework. She erased the same fraction 3 times before saying, "You know I wasn't scared of flying." Darius kept the screwdriver in his hand. "I know. I was scared you were going to keep fighting everybody until we missed the whole trip." That landed harder than any finding in the airline report. He set the toaster on its side. "I did miss part of it. You made the ferry." "Barely." Nia shrugged, but her pencil stopped moving. Darius understood then that he had been measuring the weekend by whether he had protected her seat, protected the record, protected other families. Nia had been measuring whether her father could leave the problem alone long enough to be with her. "I'm sorry," he said. She looked at him suspiciously, as if waiting for the engineering explanation. He did not give one. The following morning, Darius accepted the airline's invitation to advise on the 30-day evaluation, but with conditions. He would review the workflow and testing, not passenger complaints. His hours would be capped, and he would not serve as the public face of the reform. Leonard agreed. By the end of the trial, the replacement tool no longer labeled passengers as solo based on a single occupied seat. It checked linked reservations before generating discretionary candidates, excluded minors and their associated adults by default, and required an agent to confirm that a service request came from the passenger or authorized travel contact. The airline also created an appeal path for travelers who believed a cabin incident note inaccurately described a seating dispute. The changes were approved for permanent national deployment. A written correction was added to Darius's customer file, confirming that he had remained in his assigned seat and had not refused a safety instruction. Evelyn received a separate letter acknowledging that employees had acted on an accommodation she had never requested. One afternoon, Captain Reeves Darius a photograph from a crew tablet. The new reseating screen was open. Beneath the candidate list, a plain gray box read, "Check travel party before requesting a move." Darius showed it to Nia while she was packing for a school science trip. "It's it?" she asked. She considered the screen, then returned to folding a sweatshirt. "It looks boring." He smiled. "Good systems usually do." Nia zipped her bag and pointed toward the toaster, which still sat half-repaired on the counter from the night of their conversation. "You ever going to finish that?" Darius picked up the screwdriver. This time, when his phone buzzed with an email from Leonard about a different passenger service workflow the airline wanted reviewed, he turned the screen face down. The toaster came first. 6 months after the Seattle flight, the airline published the results of its national review. The report did not mention Darius by name. He had asked for that. It described 14 premium service searches in the original station sample, 11 completed seat moves, 3 linked family disruptions, and a broader audit that found the same shortcut had been used inconsistently at 5 other stations. No protected class field had driven the tool, but the company concluded that the workflow concentrated inconvenience on lower-status travelers and allowed employees to bypass information already present in linked reservations. The corrective actions were less dramatic than the headlines a public relations team might have preferred. That's another thing Darius liked about them. The old discretionary use of the irregular operations filter was permanently disabled. Party linkage became a required check before voluntary reseating anywhere in the network. Cabin incident reports involving seat disputes received a separate review path, so disagreement over an optional accommodation could not be coded as refusal of a safety instruction without supporting facts. Supervisors were required to audit a sample of those reports every quarter, with the results sent to customer operations instead of remaining inside individual stations. Kelsey returned to customer-facing duty after completing retraining and her 6-month restriction from lead responsibilities. The investigation found that she had knowingly used the wrong compliance code, but it did not find evidence that she had been part of the station practice that originally selected Darius's seat. One supervisor resigned during the review. Another remained with the airline in a non-scheduling role after investigators found repeated instructions to protect premium experience without requiring staff to document who had requested an accommodation. The airline refunded the affected families, corrected inaccurate passenger notes, and published the review findings internally with the original 11 cases anonymized. Darius received no settlement large enough to become a story by itself. His fare was refunded, his complaint expenses were reimbursed, and the airline paid him separately for the consulting hours he had completed after the incident. More important to him, the correction in his passenger file could not be removed without a compliance review. Evelyn called the week the report became public. "My travel director says your boring gray box survived deployment. High praise. He also says complaints about discretionary seat moves dropped. That's better praise." There was a pause before she added, "My board wants me to invite you to speak at our leadership retreat." "No, you answered before I finished. I've met boards." She laughed. Fair. They had become something neither would have predicted in row 18. Occasional friends who disagreed easily. Evelyn had kept Northstar's airline contract, but her company added a requirement that major travel vendors disclose how family linkage and passenger status data affected service decisions. Darius had objected to the first draft because it sounded punitive. Evelyn had called him impossible. He had revised it anyway. At home, the real measure of the year sat on the kitchen counter. Darius finally repaired the toaster. On Saturday morning, Nia dropped 2 slices of bread into it while he packed lunches for her science club trip. When both slices rose evenly, she inspected them with exaggerated seriousness. "System verified. Don't start. You raised me." He handed her a paper bag with an apple, a sandwich, and 1 pastry she had not asked for. Her school bus would take the club to an aviation museum outside the city, where students were spending the afternoon inside a retired cockpit simulator. Before leaving, Nia stopped at the door. "You're not coming, right?" Darius knew what she meant. "No, this one is yours." She nodded, satisfied, and ran toward the bus. Later that morning, he opened the airline's final audit dashboard one last time. The numbers had stabilized. Family separation errors from discretionary reseating had fallen to 0 during the most recent quarter. He closed the file. His phone buzzed before he could stand. Priya had sent a photograph, not a report. It showed a different interface from the one they had rebuilt, this one used during automated rebooking after canceled flights. A handwritten note beneath the screen read, "We found another place where party links disappear after the first sort. Different system. A different team. Want the test data?" Darius looked through the window at the empty driveway where Nia's bus had been. Then he typed back, "Send the methodology first." He set the phone beside the repaired toaster and waited for the next slice to rise.